Welcome to another Out of This World episode of the Show. We are two geeks who talk about everything. My name is Aaron, and I'm joined by my cousin and co-host, Landon.
Hey, good day, showians.
Showites.
Show.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Ites. Yeah, we can do that.
You know, show business. I don't know.
I see
Uh,
showians.
Showians.
Yeah, I
Who?
think the showians.
Shovians.
Shovians.
Chauvinists. Chauvinists.
Oh, insulting your fans.
Okay, yeah, a little bit. Whatever. How you doing this week? You doing all right?
Good. Good. I enjoyed watching what we're going to talk about again.
Yeah.
Here we
Today
are.
we're boldly going where no podcast has gone before, unless of course it's a podcast that focuses on Star Trek, because then we're just covering territory they've already covered. We're discussing the 1979 sci-fi film Star Trek: The Motion Picture. This was actually the first Star Trek feature film, coming out 10 years after the iconic original series was canceled. Landon, what are some of your initial overall thoughts about this movie?
All right, I'm just going to be straight. I have always and forever hated this movie. I consider it to be boring. Boring.
I'm there with you.
Boo.
Yeah,
Boo.
absolutely.
However, I watched it this time and I actually found it to be peaceful, like in a weird way, because the beginning of this movie, and we'll talk more about what goes on throughout it, but from the get-go, it's really just the longest orchestra, space scene where you don't really see it, you just see space. And it's just beautiful orchestra forever. And actually, I kind of needed that. I've been working my tail off. I've been working my job, and I actually needed like this to kind of go, oh, peaceful.
It's almost like one of those meditative YouTube videos, right? Where it's
That's
just like
right.
scenery and orchestra over the background. And I will say this movie does have a fantastic score to it,
Oh my gosh.
which later became the theme song for The Next Generation, right?
Yes, and I'm appreciating that this movie pretty much takes us from a retirement situation, because that's really what the Star Trek movies are really all about. It's retired, William Shatner's crew, pretty much old school in it, and going against all odds for a show that lasted 3 years, but it somehow achieved epic status.
Right.
So, I walked into it going, I'm going to start this off because I'm going to watch all of them again. And I enjoyed this movie. What about
Well,
you?
good. I still think it's kind of boring, personally, because I'm not coming at it from your perspective where you're stressed out right now and kind of need that something to take the edge off.
Catharsis.
Uh, Personally, I get bored with the 800 exterior shots of the Enterprise. Um, I mean, I get it. You've got a new model and you want to show it off, but come on, Roddenberry, let's back it up a little bit.
Homage.
Um, do what?
It's just a big movie shot, just an homage of the show. You know what I mean? It's just
Right.
like the ship and the reactions of the crew. They're all just like looking. And if you're listening, you can't see my face, but it's just like this long stare. You know the stare that people have right before they're about to go to commercial on like a soap opera, and they just look. And there's
Smell the
like,
fart acting.
yeah, it's like 3 to 5 seconds of just looking. You
Yeah.
get a big shot of the Enterprise or space or something, and then you go to them looking like that. But you
Yeah.
don't go to commercial. No, you go back to seeing the ship again. You know,
It's like, come on. They're looking at it like they've never seen a starship before.
in all of
Uh,
its glory.
you've spent your entire careers on a starship. This is not the first time you've seen the Enterprise.
I
Yeah,
wish
it's
I
got a shiny new paint job. Great, but come on,
could you
get on the ship.
imagine? Could you
Going.
imagine going out to your car, every day and just having this moment where you're like,
Right, right.
My
I'm just gonna stand
God.
10 feet away from my
Yeah.
car tomorrow morning, just like,
Mm.
man, that is one fine piece of machinery. Sure, the bumper's hanging off a little bit, but whatever. We'll get a refit.
This
Yeah,
2014 White Dodge Journey. Mm.
that
Mm.
2009 Corolla is fantastic.
Oh,
Uh,
to
well,
the
all
movie.
right.
Sorry.
It's funny. You consider there's a lot of drama behind the scenes while they were getting this movie made. Originally, they had planned to bring Star Trek back as a new TV series in the late
Oh,
70s, called Phase Two. They even had new characters, new sets, scripts, all ready to go. But then this little movie, this little independent film came out of nowhere called Star Wars in 1977. And that changed everything. So suddenly Paramount's thinking, oh, man, there's a huge market for sci-fi films. So they rushed in to turn in their Star Trek, that new show, into a major motion picture instead. So even then, though, production was delayed for several months. They kept going through multiple scripts. They went through several different directors. And at one point, the budget started ballooning so out of control, they nearly pulled the plug. Now, Landon,
wow.
can you imagine? We were this close to having a world where there was no Star Trek on the big screen. What would that have looked like if
Uh,
that had gotten a green light?
yeah, yeah, that would change things.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
think
We
that
wouldn't have any Star Trek. I wouldn't think.
I don't think so. This was a springboard for the entire franchise. While the three seasons, were notable and memorable, it's not like Lost in Space, although it did get a Netflix show. It's not like that turned into a humongous thing. Like,
Right.
or even Battlestar Galactica, is became a very popular cult classic show, but not to the degree that Star Trek did. What happened with this movie really was the springboard for everything that's ever happened with Star Trek from then on. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I would think if it hadn't been for, this was a moderate success. Sure, it wasn't like Star Wars successful, but it
right,
was successful enough to encourage them. Okay, we'll do a sequel and see where that goes. If if it hadn't been for this, there wouldn't have been a series of Star Trek films,
no,
and I'm sure they wouldn't have looked at the success of the films and been like, hey, let's do a spin-off of Star Trek set 100 years later
yeah.
and see what happens. And
Well, and
then
I
and
I
then from
think
there
that
you get
also
Deep
go ahead.
Space Nine, Voyager,
Right.
Enterprise, and everything we've got today. It's just
Well,
so amazing.
when I look at these movies for Star Trek with the Shatner movies, I think they propelled us towards the next generation to be able to happen, but I don't believe that these movies actually were responsible for what continued. It's like I think that yes, they're foundational, but they like led the way towards TNG, and TNG is what took it to become
Oh yeah,
more beyond
yeah,
that,
absolutely,
because it was
absolutely.
next level.
Because they were really able to build off the next generation and that time frame, um, which was just chock full of different stories you could tell in different parts
Right.
of the galaxy. Um, so the question remains: when Star Trek: The Motion Picture finally arrived in theaters, it was 1979, and we've already mentioned you get that iconic shot multiple times of the refit Enterprise. We got to ask, what do fans think? Um, and looking back, some of the research I was doing, reading about it, the reactions were mixed.
Really.
There was a lot of hype. Some folks felt a little let down that it was a little too cerebral, a little too philosophical. It
It,
didn't
it
have that
was.
action that Star Trek was
Yeah.
famous for in the past. It certainly didn't have the action that Star Wars had a couple years earlier.
Right.
The pacing is very slow by today's standards, but
Right.
still, it's exciting to see. Again, this is 10 years after the original series, so now we're getting to see Kirk, Spock, the entire crew back in their iconic roles, and the visual effects have jumped, quantum leaps ahead of what they
Right.
were in the 60s.
Right.
I mean, of course, nothing like it is today, but you compare the late 60s to 1979 technology, and this is amazing, especially that first reveal of V'ger.
Right.
We're breaking new ground here. What do you think about the visual effects that we got to
Well,
see?
let me ask you, when did 2001: A Space Odyssey come out?
That was
That precede
that was in the
this?
60s.
So it preceded it by quite a bit. I
Yeah, at
think
least 10 years.
I think to myself, like, the the idea of it being cerebral, or it not being very action packed and being really about discovery and being about understanding and new life and exploring unknown things, I think follows that path. I think when we get to Star Trek 2 and Wrath of Khan, you get that action back. But I could see how somebody walking into this one, you're like, huh, unless you were just completely into, like, I could see like a an enthusiast of Star Trek being like, yes, because of the visual effects. But I could also see how somebody wants to see like Spock like do his superhuman fighting. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
but to me, there's like there's aspects of this, the reveal at the end. I just wonder if people that were in there going, "Oh, Voyager, Voyager, oh," and
yeah.
they had this aha moment. It certainly wasn't an Empire that Strikes Back, Darth Vader is my father moment, but it certainly was still kind of a cool moment.
Yeah, yeah, that was it was really neat to think. Well, of course, the Voyager number that they use doesn't exist in real life. There was only in
Right,
reality only a
right,
Voyager 1 and 2.
right.
Uh but still, it's funny to think what might happen to those two satellites that are, they've both left the solar system at this point. So it's like, well, what's going to happen to them? How
Yeah,
far do
yeah.
they go? And what's going to happen, in 300 years if mankind is assuming still around and exploring space? What are we going to know about how far they went? And is there some alien technology out there that's going to pick them up and turn it into some artificial intelligence that comes back
I don't
home?
I don't think that I really paid attention initially when I watched this movie to the fact that the Voyager spaceship went to a machine world that kind of made it into its own AI, and
Yeah,
then it left. I didn't really pick up on that. I think growing up as a and I wasn't really in depth on the thought process on it, but I was growing up. I was just like, yeah, that went out and connected with an alien, then came back, and it was just very simple. But I remember watching this time when Spock is just like, I saw so much that has this, it's incredible, the technology and all of the things that you're seeing of all the different worlds. It's kind of like, oh my gosh, this is like the biggest thing they've ever encountered, like ever.
right.
So I thought it was cool. Not that I wasn't still excited to get, because it's a long movie,
Yeah.
to get to Wrath of Khan, but yes.
I remember watching it several years ago, and probably the first time watching it as an adult with more of an understanding of Star Trek lore and everything. And I couldn't help but wonder, can you connect V'ger to the Borg?
Oh,
I don't think they do. I don't think it's canon that V'ger and the Borg are connected in any way.
that
I
would be
think
cool though.
what most recently happened was, it might have been the first season of Picard, where they were dealing so much with androids and synthetic life,
Yeah.
that they made the suggestion that, there was synthetic life hundreds of thousands of years ago in the universe, and that whatever that society is outside of our galaxy, they're the ones who took control of Voyager and managed to insert their AI into it and create what became V'ger. Um, I think that's where they've gone with the canon of it. But I remember, this this speculation was happening before Picard came out, and so there was no explanation of, is V'ger like a part of the Borg collective? Is that like a precursor to the Borg?
Right. Well, if it was, it would come before the hive mind mentality. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Because of it being on its own, autonomous. I thought it was interesting watching it this time because I'm like, oh, like Aaliyah straight up died. She's dead. You know what I mean? I didn't
Yeah.
really get that before. I thought maybe she was just taking over. And when, V'ger's like, that unit no longer functions or something like that, I just thought maybe dormant and they're trying to reawaken her to remember herself. But straight up, she's dead. She is
Yeah.
dead.
Oh yeah.
And
She
they've just copied, V'ger has just copied her emotions and memories and is awakening that to the very end where, and he's okay with it. He's like, you know what? You're a cop.
close enough.
Then again, I'm watching Picard, and Picard is, not Picard. Picard's
Yeah.
dead. You know what I
He's a
mean?
synthetic too. Yeah.
I'm making it okay, so I guess you have to be okay with it if you want to keep the actor.
Um. All right. So I want to say I really admire the motion picture. So it's got this ambition and philosophical nature it stays true to Gene Roddenberry's vision of what he sees or what he hoped the future would turn out to be. Um, so at its core, it's wrestling with these big sci-fi questions. What does it mean to be human in a universe with artificial intelligence? What is our place among the stars? How can flawed humans and alien beings learn to understand each other across cultures and languages to find a common purpose? So these are quintessential Star Trek themes that last not just from the original series through the movies into subsequent series. But I want your take. What do you think of the more philosophical storyline here compared to what we're gonna get in future movies and future series?
To me, it matters purely and simply for the crew coming back together, for us, like getting the crew. Because if you think about the show, like the crew was tight, because they were there and doing it together, but it wasn't like relationship tight with everybody the same. 60 shows were, you had a person in a role, they came in and they acted that way, but you didn't have like deep ties. Like you have Bones and Jim like having this understanding with each other that kind of grows more and more. And even Scotty, I mean, and probably more than anything, watching Spock in this, how he was at the beginning, because I wasn't sure. Was the Kolindar thing, was that mentioned before the movie in the show? Was that Kolinar? Was that, or did they come up with this? Because it's very much all throughout the series and movies and shows from here on. But I couldn't remember if it was mentioned in the first three seasons. Do you know?
Uh, I'm really not sure. I can't remember what all from like Vulcan culture was specifically like detailed in the original series. I know they went into depth explaining what Ponfar was.
Right.
Um, which is basically when a Vulcan male goes into heat kind of thing.
A
But no, I don't remember there being an explanation of what's going on with
purging,
Spock's kind
which,
of
yeah, if you're listening to this and you're
pilgrimage there at the
wondering, this is
beginning.
like the ritual that a Vulcan does to purge all of their emotions completely, like, and to be like completely logical. And at the very beginning of the movie, Spock is the first scene is there on Vulcan with him about to finish his, get the necklace, basically. And he's distracted because he senses through his humanity, actually, his human side, this force that's out there that he needs to go and connect with, I guess. But it kind of interrupts it, and it's good that it does. And he gets on the ship, and you can just tell he's being completely stoic. He's not giving anything. What kills me is that Bones is surprised. Bones is constantly surprised at Spock being the way Spock has always been, and that's hilarious to watch.
Yeah, he's
But
always that's every time Spock like describes something or says something that is less than emotional. Bones is like, how can you be so emotionless? I'm a Vulcan.
yeah, and then Spock's
You've
like,
known me for
be
30
so
years. Come on, man.
how can you be so human? Their interchange at the beginning is hilarious because he's like, and I'm constantly, you're always, you know, irrelevant, in what you say. But Spock coming out of it, he goes and he gets to mind meld with V'ger. He sees how completely logic based, without any sort of emotion or hope, even in the slightest bit, and how I think he sees V'ger as a really sad situation
Mhm.
when you do not have any sort of emotion. So it's at this moment that Spock almost like he goes above and beyond his Vulcan culture, and then from there you start to see him build his character throughout the rest of the movies. So I think
Right.
this movie setting that up and getting the crew tight, um, you walk out of it feeling like the crew's tight for once we get everybody back together, eventually in Con.
Yeah. So yeah, we go from Spock's journey to purge emotions, find inner peace, to Decker's willingness to sacrifice himself to merge with V'ger, right? That's the point that V'ger's coming home to merge with its maker.
Right.
And well, I'm sorry, your maker died 400 years ago. Uh, but the fact that a human being is willing to step up is good enough.
Yeah.
So Decker does this, and I don't know. Are there any like interesting, would you say, religious undertones to some of this?
I mean, Star Trek has been riddled with this sort of thing. You know what I mean? I think Star Trek, flies in the face of religion a lot of times. I think there has been some respect that's been, put out there for the unknown and for God. I think, you know, you see that especially in what Final Frontier, where there's
Yeah.
conversations about that far more. But to me, I don't know. The idea of the creator, it almost condescends the idea of pursuing your creator. I don't know if this was like the purpose. I try to blow past that stuff because I believe in a good, loving God and a savior, and so when I have this type of mentality of merging with the creator and stuff like that in some pantheistic way, I'm just like, meh.
Well, you look at this and it's like, are we trying to say, or are the writers here, is Roddenberry trying to say that the hope is mankind will one day be better than God? Because that's what's happening here with V'ger. V'ger is
Yeah,
clearly more advanced than humanity,
right,
and has moved beyond its original design, its original programming, and so it's come back to find its creator and become one with it, uh, probably believing that its creator is better than it.
right.
Um, so yeah, I feel like there's a lot of deeper questions that could be asked and debated for probably decades, but yeah, I'm with you. That's just not worth I feel like arguing over.
No, it's silly. But I do think if anything, it sets the stage for the next movies. And I mean, when you have a $12 million movie that or how many million was it? How much was
Oh
it?
gosh, I didn't even see the budget. It ballooned out of proportion though.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I know it wound up costing them a lot more than they intended to spend.
I could probably look that up. So I'm interested in knowing Star Trek the motion picture. Star Trek the motion picture. Let's see here. Budget on this guy was oh, sorry, 44 million. Box office was 139 million. Wow.
So yeah, 44 million in 1979 dollars. You
Yeah,
think about it, that's a lot of money that they're spending on one movie at that time, and it's they
that's
to get
crazy.
100 what'd you say, 139 million back at the
Yeah.
box office. Yeah, that's barely a return on their investment
Yeah.
as
So
far as
check this
Paramount's
out.
concerned.
And we'll talk about this in a minute. We'll repeat it again. But Wrath of Khan, which I consider to be a far superior movie, was only 12 million and
Yeah.
box office was 97 million.
Yeah.
So performed way, well, I mean, budget less, but way overperformed, compared to the costs, and yet less money than the motion picture in the box office.
Yeah.
But you got to know, like, this movie is not one people are like, you know what I need to do on Saturday? I need to go watch me some Star Trek the motion picture. No, they're going to go watch Wrath of Khan. If
Yeah.
you are any decent human being, you want to talk about a philosophical debate, why in the world would you watch motion picture over the Wrath of Khan ever?
Typically, when I do a rewatch, I'm doing 2, 3, 4, and 6. And that's about it.
Oh, come on. You don't do 5?
Oh, heck no. That's the worst. I'd rather watch the
It's
motion picture than watch Final Frontier. Come on now.
Final Frontier is so bad.
I mean, don't get me wrong. William Shatner's okay, but that
Yeah.
story just did not. I
Oh,
mean,
it's a rough story.
we'll get there one of these days. I'm sure we'll talk about it here on the podcast, but good gosh. All
Oh
right,
man.
folks, that's about all the time we have for dissecting the motion picture today. So let us know your thoughts on the big screen Trek adventure and all things V'ger. We love reading your comments. Landon, you got any final words before we hit full impulse and blast out of here?
If you don't feel like watching the motion picture, just listen to the Star Trek theme song and you pretty much covered it.
Yeah,
Like just in your car. That's you don't really need to watch the movie.
just close your eyes and picture the Enterprise from every possible angle you can think of,
You've got it. And then that'll do it for you. But
from
no,
the
that's
bow
good,
to the stern, starboard,
man.
whatever the other side is.
And tomorrow, when you go and look at your car, take a pause.
Really, really appreciate the design of your car
Yeah. Have a little music in the
while
background.
playing the Star Trek theme in your
Yeah,
head.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, let's just try. Mm.
As, don't forget to smash those like and subscribe buttons. Hit the bell icons to be notified about future Show episodes. Like we mentioned before, next time we are going all Wrath of Khan on this thing.
Mm.
So, of course, we have tons more geeky conversations on the way covering movies, TV, comics, and more. So, until next time, have a great whatever it is, wherever you are.
See ya.